I wasn't supposed to be at work that late. That Thursday had already sucked. Back-to-back meetings, lunch eaten at my desk, and a headache that had started somewhere around 2 p.m. and never left. The only reason I was even in the building after hours was because I left my damn AirPods in the break room. I could have waited until tomorrow. I should have waited until tomorrow. Instead, I swiped back in with my badge, rode up to the 11th floor, and found the break room locked and dark. Figures. But when I turned around, someone else was there, standing just a few feet from me, a to-go coffee cup in hand. "Hey," he said, surprised. Didn't think anyone else was still here. It was Jordan. Jordan from finance. Jordan who always wore hoodies under his blazer like he was too cool for corporate dress code. Jordan with the lazy smile, messy dark curls, and the kind of dry wit that made people lean in a little closer when he talked. We'd only ever talked a few times, mostly in group settings or awkwardly in line at the building cafe. He was the kind of guy who made me forget how to finish sentences. "I forgot something," I mumbled, gesturing vaguely toward the break room. He nodded. "Same. Thought I left my charger upstairs." He looked toward the elevator, then back at me. "You heading down?" "Yeah." We both stepped into the elevator at the same time. He stood across from me, sipping from his coffee like it wasn't already past 8 p.m. I was about to ask what kind of charger he was hunting for when the elevator jerked. Not a little tremble. A full-body lurch. And then it stopped. I blinked, looked at the floor indicator. We were between floors, right in the void between 7 and 6. Jordan beat me to the buttons. He pressed, "Door open," nothing. "Ground," nothing. "Okay," he muttered. He hit the emergency button. A loud beep answered him. Then, silence. I checked my phone. No bars. Of course, he did the same. Dead zone. A slow breath escaped me. "You have gotta be kidding me." Jordan turned to me, half smiling. "Welcome to your nightmare?" And weirdly, it was kind of my nightmare. Not the elevator thing. I could deal with that. It was the being stuck with someone attractive in close quarters thing. He shrugged off his blazer and sat down in the corner, stretching his legs out. "Might as well get comfy. You ever been stuck like this before?" "Nope. First time." "Well," he said, tilting his head back against the wall. "Glad I'm not alone." I forced a smile, then sat down across from him, doing my best not to act as flustered as I felt. He smelled faintly like cologne and coffee, and his hoodie had slipped off one shoulder. My brain refused to stop noticing things. The elevator hummed quietly around us. No motion. No sound. Just us. "So," he said after a minute, "what's your name again?" "You forgot my name?" He grinned. "Not forgot, just never officially learned it." "It's Tyler." He extended a hand. "Nice to meet you, Tyler. I'm Jordan." Like we didn't already know that. We shook hands. His palm was warm, his grip casual. "Tell me something," he said, leaning back. "If we're stuck here all night, we might as well talk." I smirked. "What? Like play 20 questions?" He grinned. "Exactly like 20 questions. Your turn first." I thought for a second, then said, "All right, why do you always wear hoodies under your blazer?" He laughed. "Because if I have to sell my soul to work in finance, I'm at least going to be comfortable doing it." That made me laugh, and for the first time in the last 30 minutes, the tension in my chest eased. The elevator might have been a nightmare, but being stuck with Jordan? That part wasn't so bad. "So, finance, huh?" I asked, adjusting my back against the wall. The carpeted floor was thin, and my spine already regretted my life choices. Jordan shrugged. "Yeah, not as evil as it sounds. I don't do Wall Street stuff, just budgets and reports, and staring at spreadsheets until I go blind." "That sounds painful." "Actually, kind of soothing," he said, flashing that half smile again. "You know what to expect. Numbers don't lie." I nodded slowly. "Unless you make them." He raised his coffee cup like a toast. "Exactly. So Tyler, what's your deal? Marketing, right?" "Design. Mostly layout and visuals. Decks, internal promos, campaign art, that kind of thing." Jordan made a face. So you're the one making everything look better than it actually is. Pretty much. I sell fake dreams. You sell fake security. We both laughed, the sound echoing in the small metal box like it didn't belong. The walls were suddenly less suffocating. All right, he said, stretching out his legs and cracking his knuckles. 20 questions. My turn. What's your biggest irrational fear? I raised an eyebrow. Aside from being trapped in an elevator with a hot coworker? He looked amused but said nothing, just arched one dark brow and waited. I sighed. All right. Bridges. I hate driving over them. I always imagine the car going off the edge. Yikes! Like every time? Every single time! Okay, but what if it was like one of those drawbridges that opens while you're still on it? That's the worst version, I said, deadpan. I've had that exact nightmare, Jordan winced theatrically. All right, noted. No Golden Gate road trip. Okay, your turn. I studied him for a moment, the way he leaned back, looking completely at ease even in the most inconvenient situation. He made it look easy. Have you ever kissed a guy? He didn't flinch, didn't laugh. He just tilted his head, like I'd asked him whether he preferred Coke or Pepsi. Yeah, he said casually, in college, and once in high school. But that doesn't really count. It was more like a dare. I blinked, surprised. I hadn't expected him to answer so easily. Why? You surprised? A little, I admitted. He smirked. You thought I was straight? I opened my mouth, paused. I didn't think anything. You just never talked about it? Yeah. Jordan nodded, like that made sense to him. I don't really talk about that stuff at work. Everyone assumes. And I don't really care enough to correct them. He didn't say what everyone assumes. He didn't have to. What about you? He asked, his voice softer now. You ever kissed a guy? I hesitated. Yeah. How was it? I smiled. Better than kissing girls. He laughed. Amen. There was a pause, a weight in the air, but not a heavy one. It was more like a shift, like something had quietly changed between us. He leaned his head back against the wall, looking up at the ceiling. You ever notice how weirdly quiet it gets in here? He said. Like, you don't realize how much ambient noise there usually is until it's just gone? I nodded. Yeah, it's too quiet. Creepy quiet, he hummed. Bet that's why some people freak out. Not the claustrophobia, but the silence. Makes you sit with your own thoughts too long. You speak from experience? Maybe, he said. Maybe not. We sat in silence for a bit after that. Not awkward, not quite comfortable either, just still. Then the lights dimmed for half a second and came back. Jordan sat up. Did you see that? Yeah, great. He stood and walked over to the panel, pressing the emergency button again. The beep sounded, but still no voice, no signal, no movement. No offense, he said, glancing back at me. But if I have to share air with someone overnight, I'm glad it's you. That surprised me. I raised an eyebrow. Why? You don't panic? He said simply. And you're not boring. High praise, I said dryly. He grinned. Well, yeah. Plus you're kinda cute when you're nervous. My stomach did a little backflip. Jordan didn't look away. Just let the words hang there. I laughed, trying to deflect. You're not just saying that because we might die in here? He smirked. Maybe a little, but I don't lie about cute. I didn't know what to say to that, so I looked down at the floor instead, feeling suddenly warm in the face. He sat down again, this time a little closer. Not right next to me, but closer than before. All right, he said, clapping his hands together. Your turn. Hit me with something real. I looked at him, still processing what had just happened. Okay, if we really were stuck in here all night, what would you do to kill time? He leaned back against the wall again, but he was watching me now, his eyes more focused, his expression a little different. I'd probably ask you why you've never talked to me before. I blinked. What? I mean, we've worked in the same building for what, 2 years? And I know you know who I am. I sure as hell know who you are. That made my chest tighten for some reason. I thought you were just one of those people, I said quietly, like always surrounded. You don't seem like the kind who'd notice me. He shrugged. Guess I did. The lights flickered again, just briefly. Neither of us moved. And for some reason, neither of us laughed this time. Time had slowed down. It was still warm in the elevator, though not unbearably so. Just a little stuffy from too many minutes breathing in the same recycled air. I could feel the heat rising along the back of my neck. Not from the temperature, but from the way Jordan was looking at me. Not like before. Not casual. Not teasing. Just watching. I didn't mean to ignore you, I said quietly. I guess I just thought, that I wouldn't care? He asked, voice soft. Something like that. He nodded, then leaned his head against the wall and let out a long breath. It's weird. You work in a building full of people, but you still end up feeling invisible sometimes. I looked over at him. You feel invisible? He smirked faintly. Sometimes, not in meetings, or with numbers, but with people, yeah. I hadn't expected him to admit that. Jordan always gave off this effortless confidence, like nothing could get to him. Hearing that made him feel more real, more like someone I could actually reach. A few seconds passed. Then he shifted. Not much. Just enough so that his knee touched mine. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a cramped elevator situation. It was intentional. I didn't move. Neither of us spoke right away. The space between us, all that awkward air from earlier, had collapsed into something tight and humming. The elevator felt smaller, the silence thicker. I used to think you were kind of cold, he said after a minute. Cold? Yeah. Like closed off. That's rich coming from you. He grinned, his leg still against mine. Fair. Maybe we're both kind of closed off. I swallowed, suddenly aware of everything. My heartbeat, the warmth of his skin through our jeans, the way his voice dropped just a little when he was being honest. Want to know something stupid? He asked. Sure. He turned his head, looked directly at me. I've noticed your cologne. Every time we pass in the hallway. Even if it's just for half a second. I always know it's you. My breath caught in my throat. Is that weird? He asked. A little, I said, smiling, but not in a bad way. We both laughed, but it felt different now. Lower, a little breathless. He was still looking at me, and I was trying to think of literally anything else to focus on, but all I could see were his eyes, his mouth, the way his knee hadn't moved from mine. You know, he said, if this elevator doesn't move soon, we might have to start sharing body heat. I snorted. That's not how that works. It could be. I turned my head slowly, trying to gauge how serious he was. Jordan's smile was still there, but his eyes, those dark, too knowing eyes, were serious. And then, just like that, the ground shifted again. Not literally. The elevator didn't move, but something between us did. He leaned in just a bit. Not enough to be aggressive, but enough to make my pulse spike. Can I ask you something else? He said, his voice quieter now. Yeah. Do you want me to stop flirting with you? My mouth went dry. No. His smile widened, but this time it was slower. Warmer. A little more dangerous. I didn't think so. Then, like it was nothing, he sat back. Still close, still touching. But the moment passed, and he let it. We talked for a while after that, about stupid things. Favorite movies. Worst dates. High school embarrassments. It felt easier now. The wall between us had cracked. Somewhere around what felt like 10 p.m., though neither of us could check the time. I stretched out and lay flat on the elevator floor, staring at the ceiling like it might give me answers. Jordan lay beside me, hands folded over his stomach, eyes closed. His shoulder brushed mine. "I think I'm losing feeling in my legs," I said. "You want a leg massage?" "I'd rather die," he laughed. "Suit yourself." After a few moments of quiet, he said, "Tyler?" "Yeah?" "What would you do if this thing didn't start moving till morning?" I looked over at him. "You mean hypothetically, or are you secretly an optimist?" "I mean it. We might be here till sunrise." I thought about it. The discomfort, the awkwardness, the silence. But also this, being here with him, talking like this, letting the tension sit between us like something alive. "If we're here till sunrise," I said, "I'd probably lose my mind." Jordan turned his head to look at me. "You'd lose your mind stuck with me?" "No," I said. "I'd lose my mind trying not to kiss you." The second the words left my mouth, I regretted them. Not because I didn't mean them, but because I'd said them out loud. In the dark, with no way out. But Jordan didn't blink. He didn't laugh. He just stared at me for a long second. And then, slowly, he shifted closer. His voice dropped to a whisper. "So don't try." "So don't try." That's what he said. I remember every word, every breath, every moment of stillness, right after. Like time itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what I'd do. Jordan was right there, inches away, his face barely lit by the soft glow of the elevator panel. I could make out the curve of his cheekbone, the slight smirk still tugging at the corner of his mouth, but his eyes, those gave him away. He looked as nervous as I felt. "You're serious," I said, barely above a whisper. "I don't play like that," he murmured. "Not when it matters." I didn't even realize I was leaning in until his breath mingled with mine. My heart was pounding loud enough to echo in my ears. This was insane. It was late. We were stuck. I was tired and anxious and confused, and none of this should have been happening. But it was, and I didn't want it to stop. Our lips met, softly at first. Just a gentle press, cautious, like we were both checking to make sure it was real. And then I felt him relax, his mouth parting slightly against mine, his hand sliding along my jaw like he'd been waiting to do that for longer than either of us would admit. It wasn't desperate or messy. It wasn't about heat or urgency. It was slow and warm and terrifying in the way good things are. When we pulled back, I kept my eyes closed for a second longer, just to feel the air between us change. Jordan exhaled softly, his forehead resting against mine. "Well," he said quietly, "guess we can't pretend that didn't happen." "Would you want to?" "No," he said, almost immediately. "Not even a little." We lay there for a while longer, our shoulders pressed together, his fingers grazing mine, not quite holding, but not letting go either. There wasn't much to say after that, nothing that needed words. Eventually, he shifted to sit up again, stretching his arms over his head. "Okay," he said, clearing his throat. "Your turn." I blinked at him. "My turn for what?" 20 questions, remember? You owe me one. I laughed softly, the sound foreign in the stillness. "That's how you want to play it?" He grinned. "Come on. I just kissed you. Least you can do is ask me something personal." "All right," I said, propping myself up on one elbow. "What are you most scared of?" Jordan's smile faded just a little. He looked away, fiddling with the hem of his hoodie. "Honestly," he said, after a pause, "I think I'm scared of liking someone more than they like me." That hit harder than I expected. "Why?" He shrugged. "Happened before. A couple times. I guess I've gotten good at keeping things casual, not getting too attached." "But you kissed me." He glanced back at me. "Yeah, I know." My chest tightened. I didn't know what to say to that. Part of me wanted to tell him that I liked him too, that I'd noticed him long before today, that I'd wondered what it would be like to talk to him, be near him, know what made him laugh when no one else was around. But it felt too heavy, too real. So I said nothing. And Jordan didn't push. He lay back down beside me, folding his hands behind his head. "Okay," he said quietly. "New question. What's something no one at work knows about you?" I swallowed. I almost dropped out of college in my second year. Why? Everything felt off, like I wasn't good enough, like I had made a mistake choosing design. I started telling myself I wasn't cut out for anything, that I was wasting my time. What changed? My roommate at the time. He caught me packing a box and basically forced me to talk it out. Said he wasn't going to let me walk away from something just because it felt hard. I owe him everything. Jordan turned his head to look at me. Do you still talk to him? No, we lost touch. He nodded, thoughtful. Well, sounds like he saw something in you. He was right. I didn't say anything. I couldn't, not with the lump forming in my throat. But I felt his hand slip into mine, slow and steady. And I didn't pull away. We stayed like that for a long time. Fingers intertwined, backs on the elevator floor, a few feet of ceiling above us, and no sense of what hour it was. At some point, I must have dozed off, because the next thing I knew there was a soft mechanical click, and the elevator jolted. Jordan sat up fast, eyes wide. Did you hear that? The lights flickered again. Then, the elevator started moving. Slow. Barely more than a crawl. But we were going down. We both stood, disoriented. I adjusted my shirt. He ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking more nervous than he had when we kissed. The floor numbers began to change. 6, 5, 4. And then, we stopped at the lobby. The doors opened. Everything looked exactly the same as it had hours ago. Clean marble floors, soft lighting, no one in sight. We stepped out into the quiet, like we were stepping off a ride we hadn't signed up for. Jordan turned to me. Well, that was a lot, I said. He nodded. Yeah, a lot. There was a long pause. Not awkward, just suspended. Like we both knew the moment had to end, we just didn't want to be the one to end it. So, I said, what now? Jordan rubbed the back of his neck. I don't know. But I'm not going to pretend this didn't mean something. Me neither. He looked relieved. Want to grab breakfast? He asked. I know a place that opens early. Pancakes, strong coffee, terrible music. I smiled. Sounds perfect. I wasn't expecting it to feel so normal. 1 hour earlier, we were lying on the floor of a stuck elevator. Now, we were seated across from each other at some 24-hour diner with sticky menus and torn vinyl booths. The kind of place where the air always smells faintly of syrup and burnt toast. Jordan sat across from me, hoodie pushed back, hands wrapped around a chipped white mug. He looked different in this light. Less like the sarcastic guy from the elevator, and more like someone who wasn't trying to be anything at all. Okay, he said, after the waitress had topped off our coffees for the second time. Be honest, did you think we were going to have to pee in a corner at some point? I laughed, too loud for the quiet diner. I was definitely thinking about it. I was calculating how much water I could drink before it became an issue. I had a whole plan, he said proudly. I was going to use my empty coffee cup. I figured I'd sacrifice my dignity for the greater good. The greater good being your bladder? Exactly. I shook my head, smiling into my mug. The absurdity of the night kept hitting me in waves. The fact that we were even sitting here, in this booth. After all that, after the kiss, after the honesty, after the long hours of slow-building tension, it almost didn't feel real. Almost. Hey, he said, nudging my foot under the table. You okay? I looked up. Yeah. Just processing, I guess. Jordan nodded slowly, as if he understood exactly what I meant. It's weird, right? How you can go from small talk to soul-bearing intimacy just because a box got stuck between floors. And because you flirt like it's a second language, he grinned. Guilty. The food came, pancakes for him, eggs and toast for me, and we both dug in like we hadn't eaten in hours. Because we hadn't. There were moments of silence, but they didn't feel heavy. It was the kind of silence that felt earned, like the quiet between people who had already said the most important things. I meant what I said, he said after a while, chewing thoughtfully. Back in the elevator, about liking you. I met his gaze. I know. He looked relieved. Good. Just making sure I didn't dream it. I hesitated, then said, I've liked you too. For a while. I just figured you wouldn't be into me. Why? I shrugged. Because you're you. And you're you. That's not an answer. Jordan set his fork down and leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. Listen, he said, voice lower now. You don't get it. You walk through the building like you've got this whole calm, cool thing going. You're smart, talented. You actually care about the stuff you work on. People like you. They respect you. I raised an eyebrow. Where are you getting this intel? I observe, he said, shrugging. Even if I don't always talk much, I notice things. That's terrifying, he smiled. But true, there was a beat. Then he added, also, you have really good taste in cologne. I laughed again, but this time there was a flush creeping up my neck. Jordan looked down at his plate, quiet for a moment. Then he said, I'm not good at this. At what? This. The post-kiss, post-confession, what do we do now part. I tend to mess it up. Well, I said, you haven't messed it up yet. His eyes flicked up. Yeah? Yeah. He nodded slowly. Okay, so what do we do now? I thought about it. About what I wanted. About what I didn't want to lose to overthinking or second-guessing. How about we don't overcomplicate it? I said. We hang out. We get to know each other for real this time. See where it goes. Jordan grinned. That sounds suspiciously healthy. I'm a complicated guy. Well then, complicated guy. He said, how would you feel about coming over this weekend? I make decent pasta. Terrible cocktails. You could judge me mercilessly. Sounds like a plan. Jordan reached across the table, fingers brushing mine lightly. Not a full-on hold, just contact. Gentle, intentional. I know this started in kind of a weird, accidental way, he said, but I don't want it to stay accidental. Neither do I. We finished our food slowly, neither of us in a rush to leave. By the time we stepped outside, the sun was starting to rise, painting the buildings with a soft orange hue. It cast a glow across his face, made his hair look warmer, his eyes softer. I'm glad it was you, I said as we stood on the sidewalk, just before we went our separate ways. He smiled. Yeah, me too. He leaned in, and this time the kiss was quick, familiar, a punctuation mark at the end of a strange, perfect night. When we pulled apart, he said, next time we hang out, let's avoid elevators. Agreed. We walked off in opposite directions. Two guys who'd just met again for the first time, somewhere between four walls and a stuck emergency button. By the time Friday rolled around, I was a mess. Not in the obvious way. My shirt was clean, my hair was acceptable, and I even managed to iron something, which hadn't happened since my cousin's wedding. But internally, I was spiraling. Because tonight, I was going over to Jordan's place for dinner. Real dinner, not work lunch passing in the break room casual. Not locked in and elevator trauma bonding. Actual, intentional, he invited me over dinner. And I didn't know what the hell to expect. I'd spent the whole week bouncing between overthinking every text he sent and then rereading them like I was trying to decode ancient script. He'd kept it light. Snarky comments, one photo of a destroyed attempt at pasta. Don't worry, this won't be your meal. A meme referencing the elevator incident. You ever think God gets bored and presses the stop button on people just to watch them panic? But beneath all that, I could feel something steady building. By 7:02, I was at his apartment door, wine bottle in hand, and rehearsing a casual opening line in my head for the fourth time. Jordan opened the door in a faded gray tee and joggers that hugged his frame just a little too well for my brain to process efficiently. Hey, he said, smiling like it was the easiest thing in the world. You're on time. I didn't know you were one of those people. I held up the wine. Bribery for whatever monstrosity you're cooking. He laughed and stepped aside. I already warned you it's pasta, but like the edible kind this time. His place was warm and clean in a way that surprised me. Not pristine, not overly decorated, but lived in and intentional. A bookshelf full of thick finance books and a few sci-fi novels. a half-built Lego Porsche on the coffee table, a candle burning on the windowsill that smelled like sandalwood and something citrusy. I toed off my shoes, trying not to stare too long at the way the fabric of his shirt stretched when he reached into the cabinet for wine glasses. "Relax," he said, catching me looking. "This isn't a date." "Oh," I said, hiding my disappointment. He smirked. "It's better. Dates have pressure, expectations. This is just hanging out with wine and food, and me hoping you'll still want to kiss me afterward." I rolled my eyes. "So basically a date with different branding." "Exactly." He poured us each a glass, and we moved to the kitchen where a pot simmered on the stove. Dinner was good. Really good. The pasta had a bit too much garlic, but I liked that. He burned the bread slightly, and we both pretended not to notice. Somewhere between the second glass of wine and him trying to explain how his spreadsheet macros worked, I gave up halfway through. Things started to feel easy again, familiar, comfortable. "Okay," he said after we cleared the dishes. "Serious question. Shoot, if we hadn't gotten stuck in that elevator, do you think we ever would have talked like this?" I hesitated. "I think we would have kept passing each other. Maybe said hi, maybe not." He nodded, looking down at his wine. "But," I added, "I would have kept noticing you, every time." He looked up at that. I saw something shift in his face, a softness, a hint of vulnerability behind the usual sarcasm. "I thought about you a lot, he said. "Way before last week," I blinked. "Really?" he shrugged. "Yeah. I'd see you in meetings or in the elevator or walking across the lobby, and I'd think, there goes the guy who's way out of my league." I laughed, loud and unfiltered. Jordan grinned, a little sheepishly. "Glad you think that's funny." "I think you're funny. You? Thinking I'm out of your league?" He raised his eyebrows. "Tyler, you walk around the office like you don't even need anyone to notice you. You've got that quiet confidence. Meanwhile, I'm over here accidentally spilling coffee on myself and asking IT how to reset my password for the third time." I was still smiling when I crossed the kitchen to stand in front of him. "I noticed you," I said. "Yeah? Yeah?" There was a beat, a quiet moment. Then he leaned in and kissed me again. This one felt different. Less like the first time, when everything was new and uncertain, and more like something familiar, like we knew what we were doing now. His hand slid to my waist, pulling me closer. When we broke apart, I rested my forehead against his. "You realize we're going to be that annoying couple at work now," I whispered. "Correction, you're going to be the annoying one," he murmured. "I'm just the innocent victim who got trapped in an elevator." I laughed. "Victim, huh?" "Completely." "Let's see if I can make you suffer more then." He grinned and kissed me again. It was weird how quickly something could shift in your life. Last Monday, Jordan had been a background character. Cute guy from finance, hoodie under blazer energy, someone I exchanged the occasional awkward nod with in the break room. Now I was standing in his kitchen, barefoot, holding a cup of his terrible coffee, and trying to decide if it was weird to feel this comfortable after just one real night together. It wasn't like we'd done anything crazy. After the second kiss, okay, maybe the third, we ended up back on his couch, half talking, half laughing, legs tangled and heads tilted closer than they needed to be. At some point, we both passed out there, fully clothed, exhausted from the emotional whiplash of the week. When I woke up the next morning, sunlight was pouring through his windows, and Jordan was asleep beside me, one hand still resting lightly against my side like his body hadn't gotten the memo to let go. It was nice, and I didn't want to ruin that. He stirred around 9, groggy and warm-voiced. "Is it weird that I slept better on the couch with you than I do in my actual bed alone?" I smiled. "You could just be into lumpy cushions." He squinted up at me. "Nah, definitely into you." I rolled my eyes. That's worse. But I couldn't stop smiling. Eventually I had to leave, though neither of us wanted to say it out loud. I had laundry to do, emails to catch up on, and just enough weekend left to pretend I'd been productive. He walked me to the door, hair still messy, hoodie halfway zipped. "So," he said, fingers fidgeting at his side, "what do we do about Monday?" As in, do we pretend we're still just elevator buddies? I tilted my head. "You want to?" He looked up, and for once there wasn't even a trace of sarcasm in his expression. "No," he said simply. I stepped closer. "Me neither." He let out a breath. "Okay, cool. Just maybe no making out by the vending machine? We'll see." He grinned and leaned in for one last kiss, soft and deliberate. When I pulled away, his hand lingered at the small of my back. "Text me when you get home?" "Obviously." "And Tyler?" "Yeah. I'm really glad we got stuck." I didn't say anything. I just nodded. Because, honestly, me too. Monday morning rolled around faster than expected. I walked into the office wearing the same expression I always did. Half-focused, mildly caffeinated, ready to fake confidence in every meeting. But inside, I felt different, lighter, grounded. Jordan didn't show up right away, and I tried not to look around too much. I went through the motions, answered emails, scheduled a call, listened to Linda from HR, explained something in a tone that suggested the apocalypse was imminent. Then around 10:30, I saw him. He walked into the shared kitchen area, same hoodie blazer combo, same travel mug, same smug half smile when our eyes met. Except this time, it wasn't just passing recognition. He paused at the counter, poured himself some coffee, then made his way toward me. "Morning," he said, stopping just a foot away. "Hey." He leaned in slightly, voice low enough that only I could hear. "Can I take you to lunch today?" "People will talk." "Let them," he said, shrugging. "Maybe it'll distract them from asking about Q4 reports." I smiled. "Yeah, okay. Lunch sounds good." He winked and walked away. And just like that, we had a thing. Not just a moment. Not just an elevator incident. A thing. Hours. The rest of the day passed in a blur. People around the office had no idea anything had shifted between us. But I knew. Jordan knew. Every time we passed each other, or sent a little Teams message under the guise of work, that spark was still there. At lunch, we kept it casual. Sandwiches from the cafe, a corner table, low voices. He told me about a project he was dreading. I told him about a new brand campaign I was excited for. And between the sarcasm and the occasional brush of knees under the table, something settled. Something solid. We made it through the work week like that, quietly orbiting each other, closer than before, occasionally brushing shoulders in the hallway, swapping dumb memes between meetings. Not quite out, but definitely not hiding. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't intense, it was good, and it felt like just the beginning. 3 weeks later, Jordan and I were standing in front of the same elevator that started it all. It was after hours again. Office mostly empty, lights a little dimmer than usual. The building always felt different at night, quieter, like it had exhaled after a long day of pretending to be professional. Jordan leaned against the wall beside the elevator, sipping from a can of something fizzy and too sweet. "So," he said, glancing at the digital display, "are we going to pretend it's not poetic to be standing here again?" "I was trying," I said, smirking. "But you ruined it," he grinned. "Sorry, I'm not built for subtlety." The doors opened, empty and humming, and he gestured for me to step in. "Seriously?" I said, arching an eyebrow. "What?" he said, following me inside. I figured we should reclaim the scene of the crime. He hit the door close button, then the emergency stop, just for a second, long enough to make the lights blink. "Don't joke like that," I warned. "I still have minor trauma from being stuck here with you." "Minor?" he said, stepping closer. "I remember you clinging to me like a damsel in distress." I was the calm one. "You were sweating. You were flirting through a mechanical malfunction." He laughed, leaning in until our faces were a breath apart. And you loved it. I did. Still did. I kissed him. Right there in the elevator. No stuck buttons, no panic. Just us. A quiet building, a hum of fluorescent light above, and the taste of cherry soda on his lips. It was fast becoming my favorite routine, this closeness. The way we fit into each other's days without force. He'd wait for me at the cafe some mornings, phone in hand, and a second coffee already ordered. I'd swing by his desk with dumb sketches or fake invoices with inside jokes scribbled across them. The people around us began to notice, of course. How long has that been a thing? Someone whispered once, not quietly enough. Jordan and I never confirmed it, never denied it either. But I stopped caring who knew. There was something nice about being seen. One evening, I stayed late for a client deadline, and when I walked out of the conference room around 9, he was waiting at the reception desk, headphones on, scrolling something aimlessly on his phone. "You didn't have to wait," I said. "I know," he said, looking up, "but you left your charger on my desk." He held it out like it was an excuse. It wasn't. That night, we didn't go home separately. We ordered Thai, watched something trashy on his couch, and fell asleep under the same blanket again. It became a thing. Somewhere along the way, we stopped pretending this wasn't serious. He met my best friend over lunch and held up surprisingly well under interrogation. I helped him choose a birthday gift for his mom. We stayed up too late on weeknights, talking about nothing. We learned how to argue without making it dramatic, how to be honest without flinching. He told me one night, half asleep, that he didn't feel invisible anymore. I told him he never had been, not to me. And now, months later, as we stepped out of that elevator again, this time without emergency buttons or flickering lights, I realized how far we'd come. Sometimes the weirdest moments change everything. One stopped elevator, one long night, and somehow, that was all it took. We didn't plan for this, but I wouldn't change a thing.